right. So what's going on, everybody? Kevin Sullivan, VP of Cloud Strategy here at Evolve IP. Really excited for a panel conversation today to specifically talk about Microsoft 365 backup. And really among Microsoft 365, getting to the heart of email backup is really kind of the main component of the conversation. Now, if you're anything like me, right, there's nothing more exciting than talking about backing up our email in our 365 instances, right? Probably not a topic that many of you have gone and actively sought out. And that's okay, right? We'll talk a little bit about why that is, really how some organizations tend to approach their Microsoft 365 offerings, specifically their email offering, but other things like OneDrive, SharePoint Online as well, and why it's important to consider what your current backup disposition is, or your current backup posture of those solutions, as well as what other options are available to you in terms of backing those systems up and having an extra degree of protection for restoration capability. So joined today by two amazing resources here at Evolve. I won't introduce them. I'll allow them to introduce themselves. But Scott, if we'll go ahead and start with you, if you don't mind.
Yeah, Scott Arnold, Compute Product Manager here at Evolve IP. Happy to be joining this discussion and helping our customers understand a little bit more about the importance of Microsoft 365 backup, why it's important to have it.
And also joined by Steve. Steve, you maybe want to give your introduction as well.
Yeah, thanks. Steve Matasik, I'm manager of our cloud services team. Pretty excited to be here as well, Scott. Thanks. Glad to be part of the team that drives the ability to do your backups and restores with our system. So it's exciting to be here and talk about it. Thanks, Kevin.
Yeah, absolutely. So, obviously we do a lot of different video content. We have a lot of other resources that are out there online. So for folks who unfortunately have been subjected to this in the past with some of our other video aspects, anybody who knows me knows I'm a why guy, right? So it's very much, before we kind of get into what we're talking about and how we do it, I think it's always really important for us to start with why this is important and really where some of maybe the misconception is around specifically 365 backup and what's included, what's not. So maybe, again, putting email on the forefront here, because for most 365 customers, that's probably the bulk of what they're utilizing when it comes to their 365 offering. But maybe let's get into the why of email backup first. So Steve, if you're okay, we'll reverse order here and start with you. But one thing that I hear a lot when we're talking to prospective customers out on the front end, and even partners as well, is, hey, look, if my email is already in the cloud and I'm already hosting it with Microsoft has backup, so I'm already backed up and I'm already protected. What are your thoughts if you hear someone kind of come to you and that's their starting point for this conversation?
I'm going to be worried about long term, right? They're not incorrect in the short term. Various platforms have various short term retention usually included. You can go beyond your deleted objects, right? There's some ways that admins or someone can go in usually to restore in the short term, but it's those long-term items that you're probably not going to be able to go back and get, or litigation hold type items or anything like that you might need a long-term retention for restore options. They're just not going to be there.
So, Scott, I think that's maybe a good segue over to you. So, as far as, I think Steve makes a great point there, right? Long-term consideration, even if we put the legal hold stuff off aside for a moment, because I think we can definitely talk about alternative ways to approach that from a legal hold and a discovery perspective and some of the tools that we can offer there. But, understanding Steve said, hey, from a short-term perspective, we're good. Long-term perspective, we'd have some concerns. Why is that, given what Microsoft has as part of their default offering?
And that's really it. It's the native Microsoft 365 retention policies that are the driver essentially for the need to have a backup product beyond what is the native retention policy, most of which are set at around a month, just to use a rough time frame. So anything usually past a month time frame, there's going to need some kind of a little bit of luck, a little bit of some other element to recover something back from Microsoft past that 30 days or 1 month mark. Mm-hmm. Generally, it'll either get permanently deleted or moved into some form of an archive. But this is where having a backup product like a Microsoft 365 will give you that sense of easier restoration, easier search and find than going through your native Microsoft backup.
So maybe put in other words and kind of stepping through the process here, right? And correct, either one of you guys correct me if I misspeak at any point here. But so Microsoft has their own process that's native to the 365 platform, especially for email, that governs how they back things up by default for you, unless you have an additional solution that you bolt onto your 365 environment. Right. So things live in your inbox for a period of time, graduate into your archive mail. All of that stuff is backed up. Scott, as you had said, usually it's pretty safe to assume for around 30 days. And then there's actually like a second tier of backup that they have as well, that's an undisclosed amount of time, right? So like you have some additional restoration capabilities beyond that 30 days, but it might be 5 days, it might be 15 days, it might be an additional 30 days. It's going to depend on what the change rate of your organization is, how much new mail comes into your systems, how many users you have, and a bunch of kind of X and Y factors that don't necessarily, aren't necessarily immediately apparent to even those of us who work with this stuff every day. Is that fair to say?
More than fair to
Yeah.
say. And, the behemoth that is Microsoft, we're all pretty well aware of some changes that they'll make and then think about telling us after the fact, right? And I could easily see backup retention being something where somebody may slide the bar one way or another, and then, oops, well, we'll get to letting the people know that their data may have been erased now. So, that's just not really one of the primary parts of Microsoft's business, right? Is communicating little things like that. That's where an MSP comes in, right? And we're there to give that buffer between the trillion-dollar behemoth that is Microsoft and our end customers, and know what to look out for them, of which this is one of those major topics, right?
Yeah, and look, I don't know anybody who really wakes up in the morning and goes like, "Man, I can't wait to get out there and talk about SLAs today, service level agreements with my different
Don't
cloud
lie.
providers and
You,
service providers."
yeah.
I'm that guy, but I don't know
Yeah.
that I've ever met my counterpart out there in the world. Um, but I mean, that's ultimately what it comes down to, right? It's like if you have the backup that's a part of the default offering for 365. Scott or Steve, correct me if I'm wrong, but there's not an SLA that governs restoration capabilities around that, of which I'm aware. Is there?
I don't believe so, and
At least
definitely
not
not
in
out
the
of the
immediate
extended
future.
out. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So, and maybe kind of staying on the topic of why, right? What kind of things are out there that organizations should be aware of that prompt the need for restoration, right? Like, again, maybe legal hold and discovery aside, because I feel like that's its own can of worms that we can dig into separately. But outside of that, what types of things is an organization looking to protect against when it comes to having a backup of their hosted email solution? And maybe we'll reverse order and Steve, give you kind of first crack at this one.
Yeah, there's the obvious human error, right? Whether it be on the end user, so if they accidentally delete something, forgot that they had deleted it, and then it rolls out. So that's going to need a restore if that chain ever would need to come back up. But you can also follow into the foot of where maybe someone on the Microsoft side makes an accident. They made a whoopsie, and now that data's gone, right? We've heard of that happening before as well. If that's backed up in another system off-prem from them, that's an easy restore to initiate, right? You can get that data back. Um, and then you can get into more malicious times where somebody might get into a system and actually make the deletions themselves if they gain access to a mailbox or something like that. Then that might need to be restored if there's long-term data there as well. So there's quite a few just simple things that are very easy to occur that could lead to that need for restore.
Mm-hmm.
Now I can
Scott,
take that a
anything
little
you'd add?
further with where Steve was heading on. 80% of the attacks, ransomware, phishing, are targeting Office applications, of which most of the productive business world is running Office. So you're looking at a high percentage that something or somewhere is going to try to target you, compromise you, and let's be honest, right? No one's perfect. So it's a chance that you will have some form of a compromise or some kind of an attack that will in one way put you in a situation where you'll need to restore that data. And I think all of us would agree that you don't want to have your eggs all in one basket, especially when it comes to that backup. We talk about the things like the 3-2-1 rule. 3 copies of the data, 2 different places. All those good foundational technology rules still apply here. This backup is taking the 3-2-1 rule and personifying it in that sense for us.
Yeah, and I think that's a really important point here that shouldn't be lost too. I know we'd had a previous conversation specifically about email security where we talked about Mimecast, and one of the things that came up in that Mimecast conversation was this idea of platform agnosticism, right? So how can I make it so that there's a risk factor and a little bit of a fear factor that I think a lot of customers and even potential prospective customers have when it comes time to move critical workloads to the cloud, right? And it feels weird probably for us to say that because we've been so ingrained in this technology for a decade plus, I think, in all 3 of our cases. But there is a certain leap of faith that customers have to take of, hey, look, I'm moving a critical function as important as email to a hosted cloud solution. What happens if that solution itself becomes unavailable? Right?
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, you could potentially lose the ability to send and receive messages, and I think that was really pertinent to our conversation around Mimecast and how Mimecast, with their message continuity approach to email security, can enable organizations to still send and receive email even if their actual email provider is down. But I think backup and restoration capabilities are a whole other aspect of that we also need to take into consideration, right? So if you host all of your email on Microsoft and Microsoft goes down and has an extended outage, the likelihood of which is low. But what happens if that solution never comes back and you never have the ability to actually access Microsoft to restore that email back into the production system that it was running out of? So that's where having something like an external backup solution that we connect into those cloud platforms really ends up being of a very high value to customers that exist in that world, right? That ability to restore and have access to that data, the ability to rehydrate, reconstitute your messaging history, even if your message provider was no longer a viable solution that you could even access anymore. So I think that's a great springboard into, look, I think we've done a really good job here of establishing the problem, right? Obviously, there is a challenge that our customers and our prospects are facing, related to this. So how does Evolve IP help solve it, right? Like what is our solution? We've established that we have a nail. What does the hammer look like now? For what we can do for our customers. And Scott, as I know, on the product side, maybe we'll start with you for this one, but talk us through a little bit of like what is in the Evolve IP arsenal that we can use to help customers address this issue.
Well, I think one of the big things when it comes to losing data is the ability to restore that data quickly. So from a product standpoint, we have self-service restoration portals. Customer can call upon us to help restore this data. But hey, if I'm panicking and my CEO needs that file and they have a presentation starting in 5 minutes, right? The likelihood of me picking up that phone and getting that done versus me being able to do it myself, drag the folder and restore that and know it's done. There's a lot of value, I believe, in having that capability. So you have the benefit of, do it yourself, where we know a lot of our customers have that desire, right? They like to touch and function with their own tech just as if, we would want to do that. And then having, again, the backup support team of Evolve IP there in case something's going haywire, pick up the phone, open a ticket, and get that, extra layer of assistance.
Yeah, and I think from a solution perspective, right, the way that we approach our customers now for this specific problem is leveraging Veeam, and we leverage Veeam's unlimited Office 365 or Microsoft 365 backup solution. So I want to make sure we really key in on that word unlimited.
Unlimited.
Because, yeah, I mean that's something that, look, I've always said historically, figuring out backup repository sizing is a combination of art, science, and the little black magic sprinkled on top as well. Because you ask 100 customers, hey, what's your change rate? What's your new data delta creation rate? No one has an answer to those questions, right? We might have in the best case scenario, you might have a best guess, but nobody really knows exactly how to size their backup repository to fit their specific need. So think that that word unlimited, right? Veeam unlimited M365 backup carries a whole lot of weight. Maybe talk about that for a quick second, Scott.
Yeah. A couple of years back when we kicked this product off, it was a metered backup, right? And we started to see the influx of data coming in, and it's like, this is the type of backup where you want to give it everything that it can possibly back up. And I think this product backs up well over 50 different, you know, noted items within the Microsoft ecosystem, right? So, I mean, just starting right there, I couldn't think of 50 things to have to go through and pick to make sure I backed up. So, you know, Veeam takes care of that. The unlimited part, to your point, Veeam has a great partner ecosystem. And so Steve and I back, like I said, when we were looking at this and kicking it off, had the opportunity to say, well, let's look at what an unlimited model would look like. And, you know, as the stars lined up, we were able to find a really good, you know, option from that standpoint. And that became our go forward option, because you don't want to pick and choose things to back up and, oh, because that's the thing that you're going to need that you left off, right? So with unlimited, you get, you know, back it all up kind of confidence and a really cool price point, because there's a lot of data getting backed up, right? So
Yeah. And some of those other things that are included, right? So obviously it's email, which has been the main kind of crux of today's conversation, but also OneDrive data, right? Your SharePoint Online data, your SharePoint sites. And since SharePoint Online really is kind of the back end of Teams, your Teams data as well. So if you're an organization that's leveraging Teams not just from a collaboration and unified communications perspective, but actually as a file repository, and have different teams structured within your Teams environment, with, you know, file and folder libraries and a lot of data that those teams are accessing, collaborating on a regular basis, having the peace of mind of knowing that that data is all backed up in addition to your messaging and your other core systems like OneDrive. So maybe shifting gears over to Steve. So Steve, assuming that a customer or a prospect, you know, heard this conversation and was interested in pursuing this type of solution, from an implementation perspective, how heavy of a lift is this? How hard would it be to put something like this in place?
Yeah, it's not difficult at all, really. All we do is we just integrate our system with their Microsoft tenant, right? We connect in. There's a couple of permissions that we need to set. We send that information over. It can even be pre-constructed, so that all we need to do is kind of build on our side. Usually, we can just sign in and get that connected within a few hours, because there's not a lot to do for actual configuration on the back end. A lot of it might come in from the planning side for the implementation of it, where we need to get the information about which contacts we'll work with and who can set up. That's mostly where that time comes in. It's very quick. That was so many words.
Um, so one other thing too that I think we want to take into consideration here, and Scott, this is something I know you and I have talked about in the past, from a 365 account perspective, right? If you were going to leverage a solution like this, what do you need to be prepared with in terms of, hey, are there extra licenses that I need? Is there an extra user account that I need, an extra E3 license, an E5 license? What should a customer have prepared on the back end to facilitate this type of solution, if anything?
that's a great question, Kevin. I believe there used to be a requirement for a certain license on F1. I may have been. I'll have to check on that, to be honest, because that was one of the requirements. I believe that may no longer be a requirement. So,
It's a
but
solid question,
let me
because I
cut.
also they did change
Look
that.
into.
Well,
Yeah.
and you know, interestingly enough, right? Like, I mean, this is a part of this conversation that we could easily cut out if we wanted to, and I kind of hope we don't, because to me, like, if I'm thinking about this from a customer's perspective, this underlines one of the big challenges with this whole thing, right? Which is Microsoft
Hmm.
has a tendency, and we love them, they're a great partner, but they have a tendency to make platform changes unannounced or with very little announcement, and without necessarily giving everyone the opportunity to think through the ramifications of them doing so. And even
Right.
if you do think through those ramifications, it's not like you can raise your hand and say, "Hey, Microsoft, I have 300 users on Office 365. Can you please not make this change because it's going to negatively impact me?" So I think, again, that just underscores the importance of, hey, look, it's great to have a platform differentiated backup that enables an organization to have data survivability, right? This is all part of your business continuity, part of your IT resilience, part of your data survivability approach to protecting your organization. And that, recoverability to me is always the last line of defense. So this is very much a security conversation as much as it's a recovery conversation, because nothing makes you more inherently secure than the ability to accurately and adequately recover your data, right? And I think that's something that in the nuance and a lot of the complication around cybersecurity solutions that we tend to get into on a regular basis, that's something that's gotten a little bit lost in recent time. So one
I think
last
that's a
question
fair
for
statement.
both of you,
Yeah.
I think, before we transition into an opportunity for closing comments. And this is my big secret question that I didn't give you guys an opportunity to prep for in advance. But really quickly, in your career, right? Interesting, fun, challenging recovery story for a customer that you've helped with something similar to this, without giving too much away as far as who they are, and keep the privileged information privileged. But what's kind of one of the more outlandish scenarios that you guys have come across? And I'll let you pick who goes first, because whoever goes second has the benefit here of more time.
I immediately thought of something, so I can easily run with that. We have had the opportunity to have many great people that work with that in the backup and restore industry that make mistakes or common problems that restore from, like I mentioned earlier. This particular example, there was a person who had the I guess, habit of shift deleting their emails when they were done, but also not realizing what they had highlighted when they would shift delete said things. So folders would disappear weekly. Entire mailboxes have disappeared, and it was a very constant educational program about shift delete, and it just never ended. But thankfully, we kept all of their data backed up twice just to ensure it would always be restorable. But yeah, that was always a fun one.
That's good. Scott, do you have one that springs to mind?
Yeah, I mean, from the account management days, right? But complete data loss, complete data loss, and you get that phone call. You can hear it in the person's voice that they're either going to be in the unemployment line in the next hour, or they're going to be able to smile and turn around and tell somebody that they found the data. And I hate to think how many of those calls I've sat through, but there's nothing better than feeling like the hero when you go, "Hey, don't worry, that's what you pay us to do, and we've got your data." And it's just a function of time to get it back for the restore part, but they know that they're saved, right? And to Steve's point, we're humans. We make errors all the time, every day, and it's good to have an insurance policy underneath that. And that's another way to look at this product. You're buying insurance not just from a top-notch carrier like Veeam, but you're buying the human intelligence and the capability to recognize when something needs a sense of urgency put behind it. That's why you do business with a carrier like Evolve IP too. So.
Yeah, and to your point, right? It's very much a binary outcome of that story. You either end it as the hero or the villain, and there's not much in between. And I mean, I guess the good thing is now we come to those realizations much quicker, because we're long gone, at least for most of us, are the days of mounting LTO tapes and waiting for hours to see if your data was actually backed up and is recoverable. Now we know pretty instantly if it's in the repository or not. Though there are still some folks that are out there leveraging tape, and it still has its place in the market, diminishing though that may be. But no, great conversation, really good story. It's always fun to kind of hear the applicable use case, and I say fun there maybe in air quotes, is certainly not fun for the folks that end up on the wrong side of that equation. But before we wrap up, any closing thoughts from either of you relative to just Microsoft 365 backup in general, Veeam unlimited backup capabilities with Evolve? Why do this with us specifically that we haven't covered? Scott, we'll start with you.
No, I think the headline for us is it's a simple product. We charge a fair price for it. You've got options for self-service and to lean on Evolve IP. I mean, it's about as winning an option as you can get from a provider that'll give you 10 times the return on the investment from a security, audit and compliance, sleeping well at night perspective. I mean, you check all the boxes, and you're running with literally the leader in the backup industry. for all that and more.
Steve, any closing thoughts from your side?
Yeah, I liked all those are great points, Scott. I liked your story earlier about the CEO or someone needing a file back and then tying it back just now with the ease of restore. Um, because the story that you can paint with that is if you delete something and it's now gone and it's backed up with our unlimited backup and Evolve, you can just sign into the website, authenticate with your Microsoft account, find that document and just restore it. And if you have OneDrive syncing set up, you could restore it in place and it'll just pop right back where it used to be. I've literally deleted PowerPoint before and needed it back and went into my backup, just signed in, and then in a little while it just popped right back up on my desktop and I was able to pick it back up. So it's a really cool process. Thanks.
Awesome.
And people understand that, right? Hey, it
Yeah,
just
it's
came back. They
simple.
don't need to know how it came back. They just need to know it's there again.
So the magic is still in there now, just on the restoration side, not the figuring out your repository size.
Hmm.
So last thought for me, Scott, you had mentioned pricing. So just it would be negligent of me not to bring it up, but the Veeam Office 365 Unlimited Backup or Microsoft 365 Unlimited Backup utility through Evolve is priced at $3 per user. Pricing is based on the number of users that you have provisioned in your 365 environment. And that, again, is inclusive of your email, your OneDrive, your SharePoint Online, your Teams, and a slew of other options and things that are on the back end there from a Microsoft perspective that you might not even have direct access or top of mind knowledge of having been included in the solution. So, guys, really appreciate the conversation today. Certainly want to make sure we mention any questions, thoughts, or comments or suggestions coming out of this. Please don't hesitate. Reach out to if you're an Evolve IP customer watching this, your customer resource manager, your CRM, your account manager. If you're a prospective customer watching this, feel free to reach out to the sales account executive with whom you're working, and certainly my contact information will accompany this video. Happy to address any questions that I can as well, and certainly route those questions into the two gentlemen here who are much smarter than myself and Scott and Steve. But yeah, really appreciate the time, guys. Thanks for the conversation, and hope everybody found this helpful and informative. And look forward to hearing from all of you soon. Take care.